That's a really good point. Let me annotate this. I'm going to underline and I'm going to write in the margins so that I can come back to this later. A moderate. That's a word I don't know. I'm going to circle this so I can look this up in the dictionary later on. Oh, hey, 4th grade. Miss Pickens here. Welcome to the Wheatley Cafe, outdoor edition. It's a beautiful spring day, and I have a wonderful lesson that I know you're going to soak up just like the sun. All you're going to need are 3 things. First, you're going to need a pen or pencil. You're going to need a notebook. And you're going to need a lot of patience because I'm going to teach you how to compare and contrast 2 texts using 3 skills that is going to turn you into a literature king or queen. I can't wait to get started. Let's go. A lot of you guys may ask, Miss Pickens, why is it important that we compare and contrast texts? Well, good readers compare and contrast texts in order to look at a topic or subject through a lens. This means that when we are presented with an idea, topic, or subject, we can squeeze the most meaning out of it by noticing what 2 writers have to say about that subject, topic, or idea. Comparing and contrasting forces us to focus while we expand our minds, and there's no better gift than that. Objective. Students will be able to compare and contrast a poem and a text by analyzing the writer's language. Let's annotate and dig a little deeper into our objective. The first highlighted phrase is compare. Compare means how 2 things are similar or the same. And to contrast means how 2 things are different. So we'll be looking at maybe one subject in a poem and in a text and telling me how they're similar and how they're different. Analyzing means to break apart and make meaning or understanding. So in order for us to really understand the topic or the subject in which we're talking about, we have to break apart the 2 texts and see how they're similar or how they're different. Last but not least, writers' language are descriptive words. Figurative language like metaphors and similes, even word choices like verbs and adjectives and imagery that the poet or the writer produces. Again, this is what I was talking about when I went over the poetry lesson. If you're kind of feeling nervous about comparing and contrasting, please don't be. We compare and contrast a lot in 4th grade. Remember the article, Bound for a New Life? And we had to read it for homework and compare Sarah and Robert's perspective on the New World. Even when we read Colonial Voices or George versus George, all of those texts required us to compare and contrast. Today I'm going to model for you 3 steps to success when you are comparing or contrasting 2 articles. The first step asks you to deconstruct the task. This is a really fancy way of saying that the articles or your teacher is going to give you an objective, something that you need to look for when you're reading any text. Your job is to really understand what it is you're looking for. So, ask yourself this simple question whenever you have 2 texts in front of you. What am I looking for when I dig into these texts? The second step is to dig into both texts and look for similarities and differences with regards to the task at hand. So if I'm asking you how do 2 writers express their love for art, that means you're going into both texts and you're telling me how they're similar in terms of how the writer expresses their love for art and how they're different. Step 3. Organize and analyze all the information you've read by placing your notes on your Venn diagram. We've done diagrams in class. I want you to do a little version at home, or if you have huge construction paper, you can make a universal one where you use Post-it notes and you can use it every time you have a lesson like this. It's up to you. You can be as creative as you like. And last but not least, this exclamation mark is just extra notes that I think will be helpful. I want you to use the word bank to help you write in clear sentences when comparing and contrasting. This word bank is available on Clever. We're going to use the 3 steps process with 2 articles. The first article is Poetry Means the World to Me, which I already went over in the poetry review that was on Monday. The second article we're going to compare this one to is Move to the Beat by Colin Hickey. This can also be found on Common Lit if you want to take a look at it after this model is over. Step 1 always says to look for a task, so here's the task. How do both writers use art to express themselves? We're going to deconstruct this by going into both texts and seeing how the writers use art to express how they feel. Come along with me, let's get going on step 2. Step 2 asks that we dig into both texts and figure out what are the similarities and what are the differences with regards to the task at hand. It always helps me to physically place the text side by side and to highlight similarities using the same color, like blue, and the differences using an opposing color, like green. I understand that this could be difficult virtually. So, if you want to print your homework articles and annotate, then I encourage you to do so. If not, let's try to virtually annotate together in this model. In order to analyze both of these articles, I logged into Common Lit. I picked the 2 articles I'm looking at, and then what I did was, this will be easier too on a computer, I pulled one of them out of the space bar here at the top. All you do is just click it and drag it out, and then I just size them. So like if you click on a thing, you can do different sizes like this or that. So I sized them so that they could sit next to each other. And I'm using a MacBook, so it's a little bit easier for me to just go like click, and now I'm on this one, click, now I'm on that one. So whatever works best for you, whether that means you're toggling between the 2 articles on Common Lit or you have them side by side like this, I support whatever's easiest. All right, so let's start with Poetry Means the World to Me. We reviewed this together. I'm just gonna go through, and I have the task in the back of my head, which is how does the author or the poet express themselves through art? So I'm gonna be looking for some ideas, and I'm gonna use, for this, the color purple, okay? So I'm just gonna start off, well, the poet says that poetry means the world to them. So right then and there, that's how they feel about the art. This is how they are using this art to express themselves. They know it means the world to them. Let me go to Move to the Beat and see if I see anything similar where art means a whole bunch to this person. Jordan Messon-Benison starts by drumming. He strikes the drums with his hands, sometimes in the center, sometimes on the side, sometimes with a quick brush up the surface. Before long, Benison, a master musician from the West African country of Togo, has his audience of school children tapping their feet to the pattern of his drum. Then he tells them to clap with the pattern. They do, and the music gets louder. Next, he sings or begins to sing Gungoro Pada, Gungoro Pada, Gungoro Pada. He chants. His words mimic the sounds he creates when he hits the drums in various ways. The words, the claps, and the drumming all fit together, all move at the same beat. Get up and dance. Rhythm helps you hear music and feel music in a very different way. So it uplifts you and really awakens your soul. And from that, it becomes very physical. It takes over your body, and that's the way you want to dance. Music serves as an important role in Tango. Oh, maybe this is something. So I'm going to highlight this. Music serves as an important role in Tango, a country of more than 5 million people. I'm going to just do the first part. Makes me think this could be important. A master musician in Tango is a performer, a teacher, a historian, a healer, and a voice for the community. Wow, that's a lot of different roles that you could take. So if I'm a master musician, then that means I encompass all of these different parts of a community. I'm going to make a note here, and I'm going to say all these different parts of the community stem from being a talented artist. This creates the worldview of the Tongolese people. So it's the idea of a worldview. So just like poetry means the world to this writer, this idea of art means the world to the people of the Tongo. All right, let's keep going. The People of Tango use music to understand and connect to the past. Ooh. Back to the first master musician centuries ago. When you read about history, it's not the same as when it's told with a human voice, because the book doesn't have the warmth of the human voice. That's the best part of the tradition. When things are told, you feel the warmth. All right, so I found one example of how it could be considered the world. Let's go back and let's see what the poet says about art and how it helps him express himself. Poetry comforts me when I use jazz or the blues or the way regular folk talk. So right here, he's talking about, and I'm going to make an annotation, art. He's saying how poetry and music are similar because you use art to express joy. That's the jazz. Remember we talked about celebration. Sadness, that's the blues. Remember we talked about the blues and the color blue and this idea of sadness. Or any mood. Remember language, the way we speak, the way we communicate. Let's see. I already saw some examples when we were reading this of how music and this idea of expressing different moods or being able to communicate through music is popular in Get Up and Dance in this subsection. So let's take a look at this. I'm going to go back to the top. I'm going to say any time where music is used to express joy or any type of mood or communication. All right, they're tapping their feet. He chants. When it hits the drums in various waves, they move. Then he says, rhythm helps you hear and feel music in a different way. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight this. It uplifts you and awakens your soul. And from it becomes very physical. All right. So I'm going to highlight until it says it awakens your soul. Because I think that's very similar to what Medina is saying about poetry. That's something else we can find that is very similar with this idea of art and expressing yourself. He says the people of the Tango use music to understand and connect to the past, back to the first master musicians centuries ago. And he says when you read about history, it's not the same as when it's told to you in a human voice. Okay, so here's this idea of the voice, of language popping up again. So I'm going to highlight that in purple, and I'm going to go back and annotate, and I'm going to say language is written about just like in Medina's poem. Art equals communication. All right. Anything else that I could see in here that tells me about different feelings? He talks about everyday music. He talks about community. People join forces. I think for the most part, this was a good example. So let's go back to the poem. Words don't always have to be neat or polished like a statue. They should be used to say what you like or don't like, what you see, think, or feel. I'm going to go ahead and highlight this idea of feeling because I think that was expressed when he talks about dancing in the other article. Words to fight against hate and unnecessary suffering. Poetry is what I say or what I use to say I love you. So let's see if we can go back to this text and see if we see anything about feeling or thinking or even this idea of love, right? Let's see. Well, I'm going to scroll back up to the top. It tells them to clap. They do. The music gets louder. He begins to sing. His words mimic the sounds he creates when he hits the drums in various ways. They all move to the same beat. So this idea of unifying, right? Here he says words to fight against hate and unnecessary suffering. Does that sound like something that promotes unity? I think so. And then here, when he says the words and the claps, they all fit together. They all move to the same beat. This way has to be an inference, right? So we have to infer. So I'm going to make a note. Infer that this helps strengthen community and unity. All right, so those are some similarities that we see. What are some obvious differences? Well, the biggest difference, right, and I'm going to use a different color for this, is that in the poem, Mendina talks about words. So I'm going to use the color red. So words is a huge difference, right? Whereas in this article, we're talking about this idea of maybe dance. So I'm going to highlight dance. And again, I'm going to use this in red because this is a difference. He talks about dance and he talks about music. So even though the two are talking about different art forms, they share the same type of expression of community, of changing moods, of uniting people, of a worldview, of it being everything to these two gentlemen, right? They're sharing those things that are similar, even though their medium, their art form is very different. So here's an example of how we can annotate. Okay, last but not least, step 3 asks us to please put all of our information on a Venn diagram to organize and analyze our thoughts and ideas. So you have seen this before. I have in purple, Poetry Means the World to Me, the poem by Mr. Mendina. And then I have in red, Move to the Beat, where we are focusing on the African tradition of storytelling and expressive art through music. So the task is, how do both writers use art to express themselves? Remember, in the center are all of the similarities. So in this little spot here is where all the similarities go, and the differences are flanked to the sides. Let's start with a similarity. Both believe that art can unify, and then I want to dig deeper and find examples, right? So Medina says, words to fight against hate. And then if you go back into Hickey's article, you will find where he talks about unification. So if you wanted to ramp up your Venn diagram, go back into both texts and pull out lines that support your answers. I didn't have as much space, so I couldn't write as many examples, but you could fill your jumbo Venn diagram up with as many examples as possible. Let's see if we can figure out a difference. Mendina focuses on words and poetry, right? Whereas Benison, who is the person who is the one telling us about the history of music and the tango, he focuses more on dance and music. So they both use art, but they have different forms of art to express themselves. Let's see if we can find a similarity now. Both believe that art is a form of communication. Mendina uses the word language, and Benison says that music is the, quote, voice of the community. So this idea of language pops up or communication pops up in both articles. Here's another similarity. Both understand that art expresses our moods. Remember, Mendina talks about jazz and the blues, and Benison talks about this idea of shifting moods and having music kind of emulate the different rhythms in our different moods. Do we see a difference? Let's see if I can spot a difference. Nope, another similarity. Both use metaphors and figurative language to show how art is expressive. And I wonder if you could pick out some of the different metaphors. Remember that in the Benison article, he says that the rhythm or certain instruments are like the heartbeat, right? The heartbeat. So he's comparing music to the human life. And then even Mendina, right, he uses some figurative metaphors. He says poetry is the world to him, right? So he's comparing poems or this idea of writing poetry to the world and the weight of the world. So they're both using figurative language and metaphors to show how art is expressive. But Mendina uses similes. That's something that Benison doesn't do. And Mendina also uses repetition. Remember the word used, use? He uses that repetition to stress the importance of wordplay and of poetry in essence. So boys and girls, this is just a very quick diagram on how you can organize your thoughts post annotation. Now that I've gone over the 3 steps to compare and contrast 2 texts, I want to introduce to you your homework for Tuesday. This is going to be a 2-part homework assignment, so please bear with me. First, you're going to read Simone Biles and annotate anytime you read about how she physically moves. So the Simone Biles article looks like this, and you can look at the text features such as visuals and even the word choice that the writer uses to describe how she physically moves. Anytime you see something that answers that, annotate it by highlighting, or you're going to make a note on the side. This is on Common Lit. Then I want you to think about the poem by Aurelia Dubray, world champion gymnast. That's the poem that just popped up. That was on Monday's reading. I want you to think, how do the writers in both the Simone reading and in the Dubray reading, how do the writers describe the movement of the gymnast? This will be really important for you to get, and I want you to take careful notes. You can use the 3 steps I taught you in this video to help you compare and contrast the movements of both ladies in each text. The reason I'm asking you to take notes and to start thinking about this is because this is going to be your assignment for your writing task number 2, due on Thursday. I hope that lesson was super helpful for you, and I hope you had just as much fun learning as I had putting this together. I really miss you and I love you guys so much. And as always, if you have any questions, I'm available during my office hours, Tuesdays and Thursdays from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And I also have a special place in my heart for Penn State because we got morning meetings Wednesdays at noon. I miss you and I love you, and I'll see you soon. Bye.